We are South Africans. We've had blackouts in South Africa for the past 15 years. We do call it load shedding in South Africa, but basically, the government of South Africa has run out of electricity. So often, in fact, while we're recording, there are things called load shedding. So where your electricity is turned off for hours a day to conserve the electricity grid. And Byron grew up in the UK and he has some sense of what Europe is in for, thanks to this energy crisis they are currently facing. So, Byron, without any further ado, what is the UK and Europe facing this winter? It sounds eerily similar to what we have in South Africa at the moment.
Yeah, this isn't just the UK and Europe. This is also parts of California. So parts of California right now are experiencing blackouts, rolling blackouts. However, that's the first thing we need to address with our international audience. You can't call them blackouts, guys. Like that's racist because that implies a degree of like white supremacy.
That's true.
So the rules in South Africa are you can't call them blackouts. We have to refer to them as load shedding. Okay, so that's the first rules. So in Europe, they are going to be experiencing load shedding. And the reason they are going to be experiencing load shedding is because they've turned off a large number of, let's say, historical power stations, such as nuclear, which, as we all know, is really bad for the environment, even though it's the most green energy there is. So, because of that, there's not enough electricity to go around. But at the same time, we don't want people on the combustion engine, so they're all moving to electric vehicles, which need to charge through the electric grid when there isn't enough power. So, anyway, that means that you're going to have more demand on the system than the system is able to provide.
Hmm.
And that, unfortunately, is now becoming a reality in Europe. One, because of the green agenda, thanks to Klaus Schwab's and the WEF. We very happy to you, and we're glad that Greta Thunberg was able to make this moment happen. And the second reason is obviously because of the Russian-Ukrainian war. We stand with you, brothers in Ukraine, like keep fighting. I don't know. I support the current thing type thing. And unfortunately, it does mean that gas is not going into Europe, which means that some of the gas-powered stations aren't actually running at optimal speed. So, with that all being said, Europe's in a bit of a pickle.
Indeed. So, as we keep saying on this podcast, South Africa is often like 30 years behind the rest of the world, but in some instances, it's 30 years ahead of the rest of the world. So, we've dealt with blackouts, as I said, for 15 years now. So,
Load
I
shedding.
thought, sorry, load shedding. Apologies. Apologies. Don't cancel me. So, I thought, as a South African, I could give you some tips on how to survive during load shedding, and maybe you can tell me whether that could apply to England and Europe in particular. So, what we do in South Africa, when there's load shedding, we get a generator. We fill it up with diesel, we plug it into our mains, and then we keep it running during the period of load shedding that we're experiencing. Can you do that in the UK?
No.
Oh,
We can't do that in the UK because majority of houses are established in what we like to call estates. Other countries historically have referred to them as gulags, but what they basically are is they where the houses are really close together and they built in what we call town housing. They're basically like boxes that you stack together and they go down a row. Anybody who's watched a really corny British commentary or form of TV has seen them, so they kind of have an idea of what they look like. Anyway, because of that, your typical garden in the UK is usually like 5 meters by 5 meters if you're lucky. And I'm sure we're going to get comments on like 5 meters by 5 meters. Man, you must live in a mansion. So there isn't really a lot of space between your house and someone else's. That's if you even have a garden. Sometimes you live in flats. Therefore, there is no garden because, well, you're in a flat. So the problem that you have with generators are, as you will know, they're really loud. And especially if you have a petrol generator, they're really, really loud. However, you can get quieter generators, which are typically referred to as diesel generators. But diesel generators are typically frowned upon in the UK because of fuel emissions. You can't run a diesel generator in a residential estate because it's bad for the CO2 and carbon. It's the same thing as you cannot leave in winter. It gets really cold and you can't leave your car running on the driveway whilst your car warms up because of CO2 and emissions. So No, you can't. You can't do
Okay.
generators, mate.
Okay, so we've gone to generators. In South Africa, we can buy a generator whenever we want, fill it up whenever we want, and it works quite well. So the other solution, of course, is if you can't get a generator, you put solar, inverter, and batteries on your house because South Africa is blessed with a lot of sunshine. So a lot of people who can afford it are off the grid. So they don't care if there's blackouts or not. I mean, load shedding or not. So what about solar in the UK? I mean, I can really see the problems with it, but is there an option there as well?
No. So you can't do solar in the UK because typically the houses are quite small, and so the roof circumference that you get is kind of limited. And the problem is because the majority of the UK weather is cloudy. Now,
Mm.
the reason it's cloudy is because the UK actually sits between two weather patterns. It gets the weather from the States comes over, and the weather from Europe comes over. And interestingly enough, the two weather patterns collide over the UK, which means that typically the UK has the shit weather from the US and it has the shit weather from Europe, and the weather in Europe and England is just typically shit. That's just part and parcel of the way the weather patterns work. Now, because of that, we don't get a lot of sun, and we're not what you'd call a sun blessed state. And as a result, any solar panels that you put on a house don't work above 50%, should we say, usefulness. Whereas in South Africa, if I stick a solar panel on a house, I get 100% operational ability. In the UK, I get roughly maybe 40 to 50% because of the weather, which
Right.
means you need twice the size of the grid to run a normal house. In South Africa, you might be able to get away with, as an example, between 9 and 12 panels. In the UK, you'd need double that to power the same size house, just because you have to take into account, well, the weather sucks.
All right. So, okay, so during a blackout, you're not allowed a generator because it's too loud and pollutes and Greta Thunberg will cry. And you're not allowed solar because, well, as far as I know, there aren't any panels available until next year. But also, the house circumference is just too small to accommodate as many panels as required.
You
Okay,
you would you would get what that you couldn't get a. I won't say you couldn't. It would be very difficult for you to get a complete standalone system. You could get a grid tied system whereby you power some of your house on the solar, but actually getting a completely off the grid solution, very difficult.
all right. Okay, so for light, you're a bit screwed. You can't have solar, you
Mm.
can't have a generator. But for heat in South Africa, what we do is we get gas heaters. We get the gas bottles. We swap them out whenever they're empty, and it warms up the house quite nice during our periods of load shedding. Can you do that in the UK?
No. Now, the reason you can't there is because you will have heard of the Great Fire of London, 1666, whereby a bakery in London caught fire. At that time, a lot of the buildings were made of wood. And so when the bakery caught fire, they think that the bakery fire started in Fleet Street. It ended up burning down half of London, hence the Great Fire of 1666. Now, there is actually a monument to this in Monument Square, which is in the middle of central London. So, the reason following that, the UK got quite kind of skeptical with, shall we say, fire laws. And what they don't want you to be able to do is to set a single house on fire in a row of houses, because the fire will not be conflict or constrained just to one house, and it may spread to multiple houses. So anything that has the potential to have a fire risk is really high on the local council's, should we say, the local council's radar. So if you do anything with a gas bottle, because as you'll know in South Africa, gas bottles have a propensity to explode. You can't really leave a gas bottle in your house and use it, because if it explodes, it could set the house on fire, which could lead to a whole neighborhood burning down, potentially. So,
All
because
right.
the UK runs a very nanny level type state, the advice will be, if you run gas in your house, so say for example, you put your stove on gas bottles, those bottles need to be buried underground outside, so that if they explode, the fire risk is confined to the dirt underneath the soil. However, if you've ever used gas, you know one of the problems with gas bottles is they have to be refilled.
Mm.
So good luck doing that. You can't just put a gas bottle in your house or put it outside by the house and leave it there. That's not okay.
All right. So, I mean, as load shedding expert, I'm a bit stumped. You're not allowed to do anything we're allowed to do to offset blackouts. But I mean, we can go back to the 17th century, Byron. So you're not allowed gas, you're not allowed solar, not allowed a generator. But my friends, you can still light a fire. It creates light, it creates warmth, and you can still cook your food. So, can people use fires in their houses to warm up their house, light their house, and to cook food during the period of load shedding there?
Maybe. So there's some restrictions in this. Okay, so going back to everything we've just learnt about the Great Fire of 1666 and the fire risks to houses and how we shouldn't really kind of do anything with fire. A bit like California. So California doesn't like bras, as you would call it. We'd call it barbecues in Europe. They don't like them made of wood. And the reason why is because when a wood fire burns down, the embers still continue for a while. And in California, where they have big winds, that ember might be carried down on the wind, and then it starts a massive, huge forest fire. So the UK kind of uses a similar type of ethos, and they don't like you making large wood fires. So actually finding wood for a fire is difficult. It's not impossible. Now, traditionally, as you will recall from any kind of old traditional British movie, the way the British heated their house was with coal. So in some of the really old houses, they would have a coal fire, and the coal fire would be what was used to warm the house. Most modern houses in the UK are not built with coal fumes, so they can't support a coal fire. Most modern houses also don't have a chimney or even a fireplace. The majority way that modern houses are heated is usually through a central heating system, and if you do have a fireplace, it's probably going to be plugged into the gas. So it's going to be a gas fire. And even the gas fire has to have certain extractions and various other kind of fire safety rules. But with
Right.
the increase of the gas price because of the war in Ukraine and the Russian restriction on gas supply through Nord 1 and 2, the problem now becomes that it's too expensive to use gas in the home. And some people are being quoted that they could be paying up to £5,000 a year on their gas. So for you, just to put that into perspective, that's nearly £500 a month, or as you'd probably call it, term it like 10,000 Rand. So it's roughly 10,000 Rand to heat your home in a country that gets pretty freaking cold.
Yeah. All right. So, as a load shedding expert, I'm a bit stumped. I have one more suggestion though, but really, if you're in the UK and there's a blackout, you're not allowed a generator. The gas bottles have to be buried under the garden somewhere. Your solar won't work because there's no sun, and you're not allowed to light a fire because most of you don't have fireplaces, let alone wood. So, I mean, I think Byron, the only solution I can offer is British people or European people. If you go through blackouts, come live in South Africa during that period of time because all the hotels you have generators, all the hotels are off the grid. A lot of Airbnbs as well are off the grid. So if you're a remote worker, just come to a place that understands how to deal with this sort of stuff. And therefore, you should move to South Africa because you'll be far happier here. It's warmer, and we are geared towards fighting load shedding because we've had it for 15 years. Staying in Europe during this period of time just seems like a waste of time and money.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In fact, that's actually why I moved back to South Africa, because it's a society where you can almost self govern. We have to self govern because our politicians here are so useless and pathetic
Yes.
that relying on them for anything bar a bad cold and a quick death is really kind of a waste of your time. So it is a country that's blessed. It has good weather, it has good sun, it has nice open land space, and it does mean that because we've got the land space and the sun, we can run a house completely off the grid. Running a house off the grid in the UK is virtually impossible. I say it's not impossible. I said virtually impossible. It's very difficult, and it would take a extremely large cost to do it. And even
Right.
then, the grid uncertainty would mean that it majority of the time it probably wouldn't work. So all I can say is maybe it's time for colonialism 2.0. Who knows?
the the grand what they had that campaign once, the homecoming revolution. Yes, homecoming revolution, where all the whiteys had to come back to South Africa because
Yeah.
to fix it or whatever. So now this it can be done now thanks to the gas and energy price crisis in Europe. I mean, your best option, ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching from Europe, is to come to Africa because we know how to deal with this stuff and have been dealing with it for more than almost like 2 decades at this point. So, really, as a load shedding expert, my best recommendation is for you to come to Africa and live it out with the rest of us. It's a much better place than in your shitty apartment in Leeds or wherever you might be watching this from. And therefore, that is really the end of this video. Any final thoughts from you, Byron?
If you're a member of the laptop class and you don't need to actually earn a paycheck in South Africa and you can do your job from anywhere in the world and you don't live in South Africa, you're an idiot. You really kind of should, because it's much cheaper, it's much nicer, and at least you'll have enough electricity to power said laptop. So do give it a thought. If you have any questions, we're happy to take your questions in the comments. Reach out, do get in touch, and we'll tell you exactly why you should live in our third world country rather than your first world country.
Yeah, think about it in this way. Your £5,000 for gas a year, you spend that in South Africa, you can basically go almost off the grid in a normal 3-bedroom house.
Yep.
Instead of paying for gas, you can literally have no reason to be connected to the grid.
You can come off gas.
Exactly.
You can pay the same amount of money and come off gas.
Completely. Permanently as well. It's the best option you have, guys. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.